Today's sponsor is Yehuda and Divi Isakovitz. B'zchus refuah shlema for Ephraim ben Shifra. I appreciate that. We are on Daf Zion Amud Beis 7b A1 in the art scroll. We are 5 lines down. Darash Rabbi Yoshaya v'itema Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak. Rabbi Yoshaya taught as follows, and some says Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak. Ma'dichsiv. What does it mean when the pasuk says Beis David Kol Amar Hashem Dino La Boker, right? It says that Beis David, this is what Hashem says. You should judge in the morning, mishpat, the proper judgment, v'hitzilu gozel miyad oshek, and save that which is stolen from the thief. Now the question is, v'chi baboker dana v'chol yom ein dana? Does that mean that we're supposed to only judge in the morning? We don't judge all day long? Now, the reality is we don't have courts at night. Court cases only must take place during the day, but nevertheless, they all don't have to take place in the morning. Ella, rather, what this pasuk is telling us is im borer lecha hadavar kaboker amrehu. What we're saying is that if something is clear to you like morning, very clear what you're saying, so then you should say it. V'im lav al tamruhu, but if not, don't say it. Rabbi Chia bar Abba Rabbi Yonasan. Rabbi Chia bar Abba says in Rabbi Yonasan mehacha, same idea, but it comes from a different pasuk. Different pasuk, not different, but different pasuk. Amru amor lechachma achosiat. You should say to chachma, to wisdom, you are my sister. Imbar lecha davar ka'achos choshi asur lach. If something is as clear to you as the halacha is that a person is not allowed to marry his sister, so then amrehu, then you can say that halacha. Then you're clear. You should say it v'im lav. But if you're not clear on it, al tamrehu, don't say it. Right? It's a warning that you should be very clear in your understanding of something before you make a pronouncement. Amar Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi says, Asara shushbinin badin kolar tole bitzavar kulon. If you have 10 people that are gathering, 10 members of a court that are gathering together to make a judgment, so there is a kolar is like literally it's a collar. They used to have like a metal collar with a chain, like a chain gang together, and they used to take prisoners to be executed by having them all walk together in this chain gang. So this is the way that it works when a person is going to judge. When a person is going to judge in the group, it's almost like they're all going together out to a death sentence. Pshita. So that seems obvious. Lo tzricha el l'talmid hayoshiv lifnei rabo. It's to tell us that even if there's a student that's sitting in front of his master, as we said, that a student sitting in front of his master cannot remain silent if he sees that a mistake is happening. He might think that it would be disrespectful for me to intercede. No, you have an obligation if you're a student in front of your Rebbe, even if you know that he's making a mistake, to say something. Rav Huna ki hava asi ladina kamei. When Rav Huna would have a judgment come before him, Michnif u'maisif asara rabbanan mi beirav. He would go and gather himself 10 students from the yeshiva in order to join the court together with him. Amar, he would say, Kihecha delim tayin shiyavo machshura. So he says, if it winds up being that we make a mistake, so then we will all share the burden of the responsibility together. Right. So in other words, the punishment will get divided up amongst more people that way. And that's also accepting the responsibility amongst more people might prevent error as well. So he says, we'll all be responsible together, so we'll all judge it together. He would not go into court cases by himself. Ravashi kihava asi treifso lekame. When Ravashi would have a case of identifying whether an animal was kosher or not kosher, usually with a treifa, we're investigating we're going to investigate the internal organs of an animal to determine whether there is a wound that would be sufficient enough that had the animal not been slaughtered, the animal would have died anyway. Right? The animal would have died of this wound. That makes the animal treifa, and if it is treif, then you cannot eat it. That is correct. So you're the experts, right? The mashgiach is here, right? So this is when he would go. Okay, so when he would come to be able to make his judgments about the treifa, lekame, machnif umaisi lehu lekulu tavche demasa mechasya. He would gather together all of the butchers, so they're really, Rashi says not the butchers, but the people who were experts in the laws dealing with butchers, all together. He would gather the whole city's butcher, the whole group together, and have a committee decision. And he would say, Amar, ki hechi de lim tayon shiva mechshura. He's the same idea, right? This way, we're all going to take responsibility. It's not going to be on one of us to make this mistake. We're all going to be here together, and we'll share that responsibility. Kiyos Rav Dini, Amar, when Rav Dini came from Israel, he said, Darash Rav Nachman bar Kohen, Rav Nachman Bar Kohen had the following drasha. Ma'idich siv. What does it mean when the pasuk says Melech b'mishpat ya'amid aretz v'ish trumos yeharsena? Right, a king should be appointed as a judge of the land, and a man who collects truma, you should remove him. So the explanation is like this: Im dayan doma lemelech she'enu tzarich leklum. If the judge is like a king and he doesn't need anything, now I would have presumed that the explanation of that phrase is that meaning that he is wealthy enough, he is powerful enough, and so there's no real opportunity to bribe him. But Rashi says that it means that if he is a Torah scholar enough, he has as much Torah as a king has wealth. So then that's the type of a person that you should have as a judge. So then Ya'amid Aretz, then he can uphold the land. Ve'im doma lekohen, but if this judge is more like a Kohen, shemachzer bebeis hagronos, that what a Kohen does is, how does a Kohen make a living? He has to go to all the people and collect truma, right? So he has to be friendly with all the people, a politician, right? That's what a Kohen needs to be. So he has to go from person to person, you give me your truma, you'll give me your truma. So he has to be friendly with everybody. Yaharsena, get that guy out of being a judge. That's not the guy you want, right? You don't want politicians being judges. That's not what you want.
It's not true at all.
Right. Debei Nasiya Ukmu Daina Delohava Gamir. There was once a time that in the Nasiim in Eretz Yisrael, they appointed a judge that was not learned. So Amar Leili Yehuda Bar Nachmani, they said to Yehuda Bar Nachmani, Meturgamine de Reish Lakish. He had the job of being the Meturgamon of Reish Lakish. A Meturgamon was a person who had a loud voice, and whatever the Rebbe would teach, he would yell out loud for everybody to be able to hear. He had to be a learned individual because he had to understand what it was that this fellow, what the rabbi was saying. So this fellow, Yehuda Bar Nachmani, was this Meturgamon for Reish Lakish normally, and they told him Kum alei ba'amora. So he said, go and stand next to this fellow. He was an unlearned judge, and you'll see what he has to say, and you'll announce for him. Kam gochin alei velo amar le velo midi. So he got up there, he bent his ear over, and the guy didn't have anything to say, right? He wasn't that learned, so he didn't have anything to say. So Pasach v'yamar, so Yehuda Bar Nachmani opened his mouth and he said on his own, Havi Omer le'etz hekitza ori le'even domem hu yoreh, right? If you're going to say to a piece of wood, to a tree, that you should be, you'll be able to teach your teachings. You'll share your teachings. So then, or you say to a stone that is silent that you should wake up and teach. So then, hinehu tafus zohav v'kasef v'kol ruach ein bekirbo. So then, what you're just basically doing is you're just taking graven images of gold and silver, and they have no life to them. Now, this pasuk is really in Habakkuk relating to criticism of the Jewish people who were worshiping idols. That basically they're taking wood, they were taking stone and things that could be purchased with gold and silver and saying they're gods, right? So he was making a demonstration. How can you put these graven objects up as gods? They don't say anything, they don't do anything. But he was making a statement that this fellow was as silent as a piece of wood and as had nothing to say like stone. So therefore, he was making a comparison, basically criticizing the fact that this person should be up there. And he said that Hashem ultimately is going to bring responsibility for this mistake upon the people who appointed him to be the judge in the first place. Shenemar, as the pasuk says, "V'Hashem beheichal kadsho heimi panav kol haaretz." Hashem, from his holy chamber, right, from before him is all of the world. So therefore, he was, I guess, sort of giving a threat to the house of the Nasi, warning them, as we can presume that the appointment was prejudicial, right? That this often these kinds of appointments tend to be, and so there was rabbinic criticism for the move. Amar Reish Lakish, Rabbi Lakish says, Kol ha'mamid dayan she'ino hagun, anybody who appoints a judge who is not appropriate, kilu nota asherah b'Yisrael. It's as if he plants an asherah tree in the Jewish nation. An Asherah tree was a tree that was worshipped as an idol, right? They would have some kind of, I don't know, worship of nature or something that they had. And an Asherah is a type of tree that they would worship as an idol. And it's Avodah Zarah, correct. So Reish Lakish says that if you appoint a judge, then that's like you're planting an Asherah tree. Also a bad Aveira. Shenemar, as the Pasuk says, Shoftim v'shotrim titein lecha. The Pasuk says that you should make for yourself judges and officers in order to be able to have a judicial and a legal system. And right near that in the Pasuk, Lo sito lecha Asherah kol eitz. You should not plant any Asherah trees, any tree that you're going to worship. So therefore, you see, the hekesh, the two items are listed near each other, then there's a relationship between these two ideas, and it is a heinous crime to have a inappropriate judge judging. Amar Rav Ashi says, "B'makom sheyesh talmidei chachamim," and when you had a choice, and there were talmidei chachamim that could have been appointed, kilu nato eitzel mizbeach. So then it's as though you took this Asherah tree and you planted it next to the altar, right? Because that the altar is a good source of worship, and an Asherah is a bad source of worship. Similarly, you could have taken Talmidei Chachamim, and instead you took somebody who was unwise to lead. Shemar, the pasuk says, "Eitzel mizbeach Hashem Elokecha," next to the altar of Hashem your God. Ksiv, it says, "Lo tasun iti Elokeo kesef Elokesav." You should not replace me or do for me gods of gold or gods of silver. Elokei kesef Elokesav hu delo avdi ha eitz shari. Right, so he says that gods of silver and gold. So that's what you're not allowed to do. Does that mean that wood is acceptable? Ha de'etz. So Amar Rav Ashi. Rav Ashi explains, no, it's not. The pasuk is not telling us that it means that gold and silver you can't have idols, but wooden idols would be acceptable. It means Eloha haba bishvil kasef veloha haba bishvil zav. It just means items that can be purchased through gold and silver. Right, inanimate objects can be purchased through gold and silver. Those are things that should not be worshipped. So that could be wood, that could be any other inanimate object. Okay, so those are all bad for worshiping, and we compare worshiping of Avodah Zarah to having a bad judge. Rav ki hava asi lebeidina amar hachi. When Rav would come to court, he would make the following statement: Berus nafshei lekatol nafik. With his own free will, he's entering his own death, right? This is what we were asked yesterday. What are the judges getting out of this, right? You see from what Rav says, it doesn't sound like a good deal for judges, right? Although, it seems like it was a political appointment that some people liked for the sake of respect. But Rav, who was appropriate for being a judge, clearly wasn't welcoming the position. It was something he had to do as a leader of the nation, but it was not something that was without risk. So it'd say, with my own free will, I walk into basically doing something that I can get punished with death for, right? I'm not interested. Utzvi Bey say, lace who ovid, and for the sake of his own household, he doesn't get any benefit. V'reikan lebese ayil, ulevaj tebia kietzia. He's coming out of his house with nothing, and at least he should return to his house the same way, right? At least he shouldn't lose in the bargain. Kiavachazi buha abasre, when he would see that there would be a crowd of people who would be coming after him. Obviously, he was worthy of great respect. This is the same Rav we had talked about a few pages ago for his incredible wisdom, right? So he would see a crowd behind him on occasion that was celebrating, the fact that he's the incredible rabbi of the generation. Amar, he would say, Im yalil shemayim si'u kegol lenetzach yoved, right? That even if a person would be elevated up to the heavens, and he would have such success, at the end, he's going to his honor is going to be reduced, and he's going to be as demeaned as manure, right? So in other words, what goes up must come down, right? You get all this honor and respect and whatever. At the end of the day, it's not worth anything.
With all these parameters, was it difficult historically to get Jewish judges? No pay, derision, perhaps threats of
violence and all that kind of a thing.
Bribery. Might be able not see this person who ruled against in shul the same way. I don't know.
It's a good question. I'm going to presume that the answer is yes, based on the fact that, remember the first few pages we learned that when we couldn't find judges for basic loan cases, we reduced the qualifications. If we didn't have a short of judges, why would we have to reduce the qualifications? Why would there even be a discussion of reducing qualifications?
Do they find a way to pay them for their time, not for their judgment or something like that?
So in modern times, there is a payment for judges and things, and they do get paid for that, right? So they do get paid, but but it's not like it's there's a salaried position. Correct, exactly.
Is it like getting paid for preparing the
That's
case?
what I'd like to find out. I could find. Let me see if I could find. I could contact Rabbi Aaron or somebody on the Beis Din and see
They're
how
not
that
allowed
works.
to
Right.
get paid, but they could get paid for whatever time they.
It's a good question. Right? It's a good question to know, right?
Don't they get paid by the government sometimes? Based on the courts?
Well, I mean, you mean like would they be would the Nasi be paying them? It doesn't appear so. Rav certainly makes it sound like he's not getting paid, right? There's no other source that I have for exactly what the judge is getting paid other than the fact that Rav just said that he's not getting anything, right? Okay, although he's getting quite a bit of honor, which he didn't want, right? Okay. Marzutra Chasida, ki having mikaspi le b'Shabbos derigla. So Marzutra Chasida, so on the Shabbos before each Yom Tov would give him. They'd have the rabbi would be responsible to give a big shiur, right? He would.
Like a drasha.
He was a big drasha in order to be able to teach the laws of that holiday. So when he would come, everybody would come out to hear his shiur. So he was an older fellow and he couldn't walk necessarily as easily by himself. The people used to carry him on their shoulders. Right, so it was a big mob. You can imagine, like the end of the football game when they pick the star quarterback. They're all like picking him up on their shoulders and cheering him, and it's a big scene. So when that was going on, Amar Hachi, he would say like this: Kilo liolam chosein v'imnezer lador vador. He says that even if right now you are strong, don't rely on your strength because it's not going to last forever, right? Even if you are one to be able to get a crown, so you should know that it's not going to last for all your generations, right? You might be worthy of something now, but don't get too used to it. That's the bottom line. So they would have a proper attitude to keep the kind of respect they were receiving in perspective. Darish Bar Kapara. Bar Kapara said, Minoha milsa da'am rabbanim. Where do we know this statement that the rabbi said? Hava masunin bedin. It says that you should be deliberate in judgment. That we have in Pirkei Avos, right? They said that masunin bedin should be deliberate in judgment. Why is it that you should be deliberate in judgment? Maybe you should judge the case as fast as you can. Get the people out the door so we can get on to the next case. So Dichsiv, the pasuk says, Lo sa'aleh b'ma'alos. When it says about going up the mizbeach, it says that you should not have stairs. There's a ramp because you don't want anybody rushing up. Right? There's no rush to go rush into the avoda.
Or for tznius reasons.
And for tznius reasons, correct. The samech lein, right near it says ve'ele hamishpatim. Right afterwards, it talks about the mishpatim, the judges. So therefore, we see rushing is not a good positive characteristic when it comes to performing your service of Hashem or when it comes to making judgments. Amar Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Eliezer says, "Minayin l'dayin shelo yifsa al roshe am kodesh." How do we know that it is inappropriate for a judge to literally, it says, step on the heads of the people? Now, what they would do is that they didn't have chairs when they would come into the Beis Medrash. Everybody would find a comfy place on the floor and settle in. So it would be inappropriate for the rabbi who's giving the drush to come late, right? And after everybody's found their seats. And if he would be stepping through the crowd, it would look like he's stepping on everybody's head. That would be a disrespectful thing. How do you know that
I'm brutal.
Well, yes, but he wasn't literally stepping on everybody's heads. But nevertheless, it's an inappropriate thing to do. It shows disrespect for the students. Shneimar, as the pasuk says, Lo sa'aleh b'ma'alos, you should not go on to the steps. The samech lein afterwards, ve'ela hamishpatim, these are the judges. Meaning, judges shouldn't be stepping onto the steps, literally the people that are there. Asher tasim, these are the judgments that you should place. Asher tilam dame, you should teach them. It shouldn't say asher tasim. These are the judgments. These are the laws that you place before them. It should be these are the laws that you should teach them. Right? That's when Parshas Mishpatim should say that these laws you should teach. So Amar Rabbi Yirmiyah v'itim Rabbi Chia bar Abba. Rabbi Yirmiyah says, someone says Rabbi Chia bar Abba. Eilu klei hadayanin. This means that there are certain utensils that every judge should have with him in his courtroom that are helpful. Rav Huna ki hava nafik ladin. Rav Huna, when he would go to court, Amar Hachi, he would say as follows: Afikule mane chanusai. Take my judgment utensils. What did they have? A makal. I need my stick. Uritzua, and the strap for giving lashes. The makal was for hitting somebody for not following the rabbinic enactments. Uritzua, I guess. Veshufra, Vesandala, and also the shofar in order to announce somebody gets put in cherem, and the sandala and the sandal that they would use for chalitza. Right, they would take the shoe off of the person in order to indicate that they were doing chalitza. So those are the things. He would have those things in their court, ready to use in case they needed to punish. And I will command your judges at that time, saying, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan says, Kineged makal uritzuah tezaris. It means that, what does it mean? You should command your judges at this time. They should make sure that they are commanding force. Right? The judges should use their strap and they should use their authority, because push your authority a little bit in order to be able to make sure that people are scared of the law. Right? They have a healthy respect for the law. Shemua bein acheichem ushvatitem. So you should hear amongst your brethren, and you should judge them. So what does that mean? Amar Rabbi Chanina. Rabbi Chanina says, "Azar lebesin." This is a warning to basin shlo yishma divrei baldin kodem sheyavo baldin chavero. It means that when the claims in court are heard, they need to be, both of the plaintiff and the defendant have to be present. Right? They have to be able to hear each other. You can't listen to one side without the other side present. V'azhar lebaldin. Also, it is a warning that one side of the court case shouldn't try to make his side of his case sound better before he comes to court to the judge, right? Shouldn't okay, I know this is going to be my judge tomorrow. I see him at Ma'ariv. So I tell you, I've got this really weird case. It's clear I'm right. Don't do that, right? You should keep it so that you'll bring your case to court and have it just right.
Uncomfortable situation as well.
Right. So, Karbe nami shmo bein achechem. Right. So that's also considered that it should be heard amongst your brothers. Okay. So now, Rav Kahana Omar Mehacha. Rav Kahana says, where do I see that from? Milo sisa lo sasi. That the pasuk says, lo sisa shemashav, you should not bear a false witness. And also it means lo sasi. Like we have this yeshem lemikra, yeshem lemasoros that we discussed, that the word is written without vowels. So the word sisa can also be pronounced lo sasi, meaning that you should not, it's a warning to a litigant that he should not bring his case forward before the other fellow, right? Lo sasi shemashav. He shouldn't be bringing a false teaching or a false hearing, right? You're not just commanded not to receive it, lo sisa, not to receive a false testimony, but also not to produce a testimony of falsehood, even if your testimony is valid. It's just that you shouldn't give it early to the judge before the court actually comes into session. Ushvatitem tzedek, the next part of the post says that you should judge with righteousness. Amar Shlakish tzedek hasadin ve'achar kach chat chehu. So he says what you should do is you should make sure that you have clearly in your mind what the law is, and then afterwards you pronounce it, right? Don't come into court and figure it out as you're going, right? Make sure that you have very clear in your mind what your decision is, and then after you know what your decision is, then you come into court and you make your pronouncements. That's Rish Lakish's advice. Bein ish ubein achiv, right? So then the pasuk continues, and it says, "Yishvatim tzedek bein ish ubein achiv." You should make a righteous judgment between a man and his brother. Amar Rabbi Yehuda afilu bein bayis la'aliyah. This means that if you have two brothers and they have a building that they have to split, right? The father leaves a house that has a upstairs and a downstairs, and one brother's going to live upstairs, one brother's going to live downstairs. You should judge the case rather than saying, "Oh, what's the problem here? You get the upstairs, you get the downstairs, and then you're even." Right? Everything's simple. No, you have to take into consideration that first floor property is worth more than second floor property. And therefore you judge the case and you do a full evaluation, do your job, right? Basically go through the whole case, figure out how much more the bottom is worth than the top, and make sure that the person who's on the bottom floor is paying for the right to be able to use the bottom floor from the person in the upper floor. Ubein Gero. Also it says, Ubein Gero, Amar Rav Yehuda afilu bein tanur likirayim. right? This means gero from the language of those things that you are living with. So Rabbi Yehuda says, even if the issue at stake is that they're splitting up, one person's going to get there's two types of stoves here, a tanur and a kirayim. Basically, one was double the size of the other. And so the difference in value is minor. And you might think it's not worth the judge's time. Just fine, you take this one, you take this one. What's the big deal? The answer is judges are told, even if it's a minor amount of money between the two, if this is what the case is, judge the case, make sure that you follow all the procedures properly. Then the next thing, lo sakiru panim b'mishpat, you should not recognize one person over the other in judgment. Rabbi Yehuda sounds like, playing favorites here, but it goes further. Rabbi Yehuda says, lo sakirehu, Rabbi Elazar Omer, lo sinach rehu. So he says, what it should mean is that you shouldn't recognize somebody and give him favoritism. And Rabbi Elazar Omer, that you should not take somebody who you dislike and treat him more poorly, right? So you can't go either way. You can't recognize him and say, I'm going to treat you nicely, and I'm going to recognize this guy and say, I'm going to treat you poorly. Then here's a story. Ushbezichne derav also lekame ledina. So there was the landlord, right? Or I'm not sure if he's the landlord or if he was the person, or if Rav was the landlord. I think he was the landlord. He was Rav's landlord. Came before him for a judgment. Amar lo lavush bezichniat. He said, "Aren't you my landlord?" So Amar lo in. He says, "Yeah." So Amar le dina isli. So I have a court case. So I'd like to share my court case with you. So Amar le. So Rav said, "Psil nalach ledina." I have to recuse myself. I can't because I'm too involved with you. I owe you a thanks, a debt, because you're a gracious, wonderful host, and I can't. So Marle Rav Rav Kahana. So Rav told Rav Kahana, who is his student, poke daine. So go ahead, you be the judge of the case. So he assigned Rav Kahana the case. Chazya dehava kagoyis bay. So Rav Kahana observed that this fellow was being very chummy with Rav anyway, right? He was very confident that it's Rav's student who's going to be judging the case. So therefore, I'm very confident that everything is going to turn out okay.
Was he an official or authorized judge?
Was he officially authorized? Did he have permission? It's a good question. Or whether he was acting without permission, but he was following Rav's authorization. It's not clear that Rav Kahana had his own permission. I would presume he did because he just stepped in without question. Okay? So Amarle, eat tsaisa tsaisa. Ivi'ilo, mafikna loch Rav meonech. He says, look, if you're going to listen, I'm the judge in this courtroom. If you're going to listen, great. If you're not, then I'm going to make it so that you cannot speak to Rav at all. I'm going to put you in Cherem. I'm going to make you excommunicated. And you're not. The student is saying this now. That was Rav Kahana said. Yeah, the student said this. Basically, the student had to say, look, I'm the judge, not Rav. And your relationship with Rav, that's the reason Rav got out of the case. So I'm treating you like everybody else, and cut out the nonsense by being chummy with Rav, because it's not gonna fly here.
So right? They didn't want in the courtroom that they're still
exactly. So he wanted to be able to make sure that it was very clear to everybody that this guy was not getting special treatment because he's the Rebbe's friend. Okay, so now the next pasuk says in Devarim that Moshe commands the Dayanim kekoton kegodol tishma'un. You should listen to the small and the large alike. Amar Reish Lakish says shechaviv alecha din shel pruta kedin shel me'amana. It means that when the court case comes to you, you gotta take all court cases seriously, right? Even if one court case is a matter of a couple of bucks and another one is a matter of thousands of dollars, you have to do the right judgment by all your court cases. So what is the practical reason why Moshe would give that warning? So So if the point is that Moshe is saying to the judges, you've got to pay attention and judge the case, umif sekei pshita. So that's obvious. Why? That's the judge's job. We wouldn't presume the judge would do less than what he's supposed to do. Ella lakdume. The answer is you might think that what you're supposed to do is that you should move the bigger cases forward in the docket so that they would get brought to court faster. But that's not true. You're supposed to be judging the cases according to the order in which they come before you, And that means that if you've got a case that's for a few dollars that somebody, some kid is suing his friend over his baseball cards, then that's the case you got to judge before the multi-million-dollar business deal that is scheduled for later this afternoon. Lo saguru mipnei ish. So we had the pasuk that we had been discussing for several times before, right? That said that a person should not be quiet, right, because of another person, and he has to be able to speak out what is on his mind. Ki hamishpat le'elohimhu, because the judgment is for Hashem. Okay, Amar Rav Chama Rabbi Chanina Amar Kadosh Baruch Hu, Hashem is saying, Lo dayan l'rishayim shenot lon mizah mamon v'nostim lazeh shelo kedin ela shematrichin osi la'achzir mamon lebalav. A judge needs to understand that not only is a judge who rules falsely and he keeps quiet, not only is he causing money to be in the wrong hands of the wrong person and he's affecting a person, but he has to understand that he is judging against Hashem as well, because Hashem has to come back later on and figure out how to work the universe with Hashgacha Pratis to make sure that the money that this guy deserves gets from this fellow to this person in another way, right? If you were judging it properly, then it would take care of itself. Now you're involving Hashem. Hashem has to fix your mistakes. So you should be aware of that. Next, Pasuk says, V'hadavar asher yiksha michem, Moshe Rabbeinu says to the judges, if there's a law that's too hard for you, this is when they were dividing up and they had already had the lower court system, and they had that every case that was too difficult for lower court would go up to the upper court. Moshe Rabbeinu tells everybody, look, if there's a case that's too hard, you'll come to me and I'll solve it. So Amar Rabbi Chanina v'itema Rav Yoshia. So Rabbi Chanina says in the name of Rabbi Yoshia, Al davar zeh nenash Moshe. Moshe was punished for making such a statement, because he should have not said that come to me. He should have said, if there's a hard case, I'll check with Hashem and find out what the halacha is. Right? Instead, he made it sound like he is the source for all of the halachos. So Shenemar, where do you see that Moshe Rabbeinu was punished? Shenemar, the pasuk says, Vayikrav Moshe es mishpaton lifnei Hashem. Hashem brought their judgment before Hashem, meaning that the daughters of Tzlafchad came to ask a question about the inheritance that was supposed to go to their father, but their father had died. And so they were worried, why should we lose the portion that was designated for our father in Eretz Yisrael? So therefore they went to Moshe Rabbeinu with that concern. And Moshe was humbled because he spoke in a way that made it sound like he was prepared to answer all questions. Moshe had to be reminded that there will be halachic questions you won't know the answer to, and you've got to go ask Hashem. So Moshe was reminded of that fact.
For a judge?
And a judge, I guess he has to know he's got to go ask his Rabbi sometimes, right? Or go look in a sefer sometimes, right?
What about that principle that ultimately Hashem relinquishes the decision making it's given to us
as long as he does it, as long as a person does his best, right? Lo b'shamayim he.
Yeah. So it's not really in contradiction with what.
Correct. It wouldn't be. I agree with what you're saying. What is the problem with Moshe Rabbeinu saying, "I will come and I will make a decision"? Ultimately, but I suppose that Moshe is the exception to that, because Moshe was going to Hashem and asking directly. I guess the process of receiving the Torah to Moshe continued on through their time in the Midbar, because he was going back and hearing more decisions from Hashem. So it's now that the Torah is already given, Lo b'shamayim, we wouldn't expect a judge to not know the answer to a court case and then go to daven and hope for a prophecy in order to be able to get a resolution to his concerns.
So will you look at a sefer or maybe consult
his rabbi? Yeah, consult his rabbi. Ask the right questions, right? But a person shouldn't be, I guess. But I guess the point that they're making is even Moshe Rabbeinu has to be able to make sure that he understands, I'm not the be all and end all. Right?
You might want to say this one to the Daf after the Shiur.
So, Maskif la Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, Miksiv vashmiachem. Right? Wait a second. Moshe's not being criticized in this pasuk. That's not what's going on here. You've got the story wrong. Moshe Rabbeinu doesn't say, right, that come to me and I will teach you what to do. Ushmativ ksiv. He says if it says that if you don't know what to do, come and tell me about it. And therefore, if I know the lacha, then I'll tell you. V'lo, azilno gemirna, I'll go ask Hashem, and then he'll teach me. Moshe Rabbeinu was completely appropriate in the way he phrased it. That's what Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak is saying. There's nothing wrong with what Moshe said. So therefore, if there's nothing wrong with what Moshe said, then why is it that Benos Tzlofchad had a question, the daughters of Tzlofchad had a question that Moshe Rabbeinu couldn't answer? It made good sense according to Rabbi Chanina. Rabbi Chanina said the reason why there was a question is because Hashem had to remind Moshe that he doesn't know everything. But according to this, Moshe was completely appropriate in what he said. So then why was there something that Moshe Rabbeinu, in fact, did not know the answer to? Ela Kedetanya is like we learned in a brisa. Ru'uya parshas nachlos shetichasev al yedei Moshe Rabbeinu. It would have been appropriate that the whole section talking about inheritance should have been taught by Moshe Rabbeinu. There's nothing wrong with Moshe Rabbeinu. Could have been the teacher like he taught everything else in the Torah. It was just that Benos Tzlofchad were meritorious because they thought they were so bothered by the fact that they would lose their share in Eretz Yisrael because they loved Eretz Yisrael so much. They were meritorious, and the Torah went out of its way in order to record their story and have the idea, the concept of inheritance taught through them because of how they valued their father's share in Eretz Yisrael. So Ru'uya Haisa Parshas Mekoshish Shetichaseva de Moshe Rabbeinu. Same thing. This section about gathering. There was a fellow who gathered wood on Shabbos, and he gets punished for violating Shabbos. And Moshe Rabbeinu, they lock him up. And they don't know what to do. And Moshe Rabbeinu has to ask Hashem, well, why didn't Moshe know what to do? Really, Moshe should have been able to know what to do. Ella shenischayev mikoshesh, but really what happened was this mikoshesh, this fellow who was gathering up the wood, was a bad person, and therefore v'nichtav al yado, the Torah wants to be able to stress the bad actions of this person. So therefore, the story was taught through this person, and l'lamedcha, to teach you a lesson. Shemegalgal in chova yidei chayev uzchus al yidei zakai, that somebody who is a good person, then good teaching should be taught through that person. And somebody who is a bad person should have bad teachings taught through him.
So it's twice this family stomped Moshe, right?
No, different. Yes, actually it is correct. Because Mokoshish is 12 that is correct. Yes, that's a good point. Right? This family twice stumped Moshe. It's a good point. Right? We have to think about that. Why how this family and Moshe. I'm sure there's something there. Okay. So Ksiv, it says, Vatsave'es shovtechem ba'isahi. Right, that I will command your judges at that time. And it says, I command you at that time. Well, is the command on the judges or is the command on the people? So Amar Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Elazar Amar Rabbi Simlai, in the name of Rabbi Simlai, Azhar Tzibur, this is a warning to the congregation. Amos Dayan Aleim. The congregation has to remember to respect the judges. There should be an awe, a fear, respect of the judges on them. Azhar Dayan. And the judge, the perspective the judge should have, sheyisbol as atzibur, that he has the responsibility of being the caretaker for the congregation. Ad kama, how much is this responsibility to take care of the people? Amar Rabbi Chanan v'itim Rab Shabsoi. Rabbi Chanan, some say it was Rab Shabsoi who said, Kasher yisa uman es hayonik, like a nurse takes care of a baby, right? That's the responsibility. Judges have to look at it as, I understand that the people have to show you respect, but the judge has to take care of the people, right? That's what the leader is. Ksiv, the pasuk says, Ki ata tavo, ksiv ata tavi. Right? The pasuk says in Dvarim, pasuk lamed aleph, pasuk zayin, that it says Moshe is telling Yoshua that you're going to come when you come into Eretz Yisrael. So then he gives Yoshua the advice
swimming in the ocean.
That you're supposed to you're gonna Vayomer Elav le'enei kol Yisrael, in front of everybody. Atat tavo es ha'amazeh, you're gonna go with this nation into the land. But then Hashem is talking to Yeshua in Pasuk Chav Gimel a few psukim later, and Hashem commands Yeshua, and he says Chazak ve'emat, be strong, right? And he says Atat tavi, you're gonna bring them in. So which is he going with them or is he bringing them in? So Amar Rabbi Yochanan says, Amar lo Moshe li Yeshua. Moshe was giving advice to Yeshua, right? Yeshua is a student. He gives him the following advice. Ata v'hazkenim shebedor imahem. You and the leaders, the other leaders, should together work as a team to lead this nation. And Amar lo Kodesh Baruch Hu, Hashem says, Toma kel v'hach al kad kedem. You have to get your stick and whack these guys on the head, right? You get them in line. You're the boss, and you act like the boss. Right? So now that's a very important thing. Moshe Rabbeinu, what's the difference between Moshe Rabbeinu and Hashem? Hashem is contradicting Moshe. But the answer is that Moshe Rabbeinu had this experience, right? Moshe Rabbeinu, as the leader of the Jewish people, was trying to lead the Jewish people, and they kept doing the wrong thing. So Moshe said, I need a Sanhedrin. And then Hashem gave Moshe Rabbeinu a Sanhedrin, and Moshe Rabbeinu worked together with the Sanhedrin. And he gave Yoshua the advice. It worked for me. This is what I advise you. Get your Sanhedrin together, work together with your Sanhedrin, build your team, work together, be a, what do they call it, a democratic leader. That's the right way to go. Hashem says, no, Yoshua, you got to read your circumstances, situational leadership, right? Situational leadership. What you got to understand is that this is not the same as it was during Moshe Rabbeinu's time. You're the unconditional leader, and you've got to come in and you've got to stand up and say, I'm the boss, my way or the highway, and make sure that everybody gets in line. That's the response. That's how you're supposed to lead. Davar acher, another interpretation of this is Lador ve'ein shnei dvar lador. Right? Echad lador ve'ein shnei dibar lador. There's basically Hashem is telling him there is one leader of the generation. There aren't two leaders of the generation, right? If you have two different opinions, two leaders, you get too many opinions, right? This one, then you get arguments, and this one says this way, this one says that way. Hashem's telling Yoshua, you lead, right? And maybe it was different for Moshe, because Moshe had the respect, even though Moshe Rabbeinu needed help ruling the people, he was the one who was speaking to Hashem. The respect for Moshe Rabbeinu, his unique position, created that leadership regardless of whether he was taking respect from everybody or involving everybody or not. Whereas when it comes to Yoshua, if he had given that respect to everybody else, everybody would eventually said, well, why are you the boss then? Right? We could do it. So therefore he said, make sure, Yoshua, that you step up and you be that leader. Tana, we learned, Zimun Bishlosha. A Zimun, which literally means an invitation, is with three. My Zimun, what is the Zimun that we're talking about that needs three? Ilema Birkas Zimun. Maybe we're talking about benching, right? We know in Mesechus Brachos that when you're going to have benching together and you want to make a Zimun, you need to have three people. So Vatanya, but we ordered in a brisa, Zimun ubirkas Zimun b'shlosha. That when it comes to a Zimun, and when you're going to invite people for benching, you need three. Well, that means there's two separate cases. There's something called a Zimun, and there's something called a Birkas Zimun. Birkas Zimun is for benching. What is a Zimun that requires three? Maybe one is explaining the other, right? One is a Zimun. What is a Zimun? It is the Birkas Zimun. No, that's not true. My Zimun, Birkas Zimun, Vatanya, we learned in a brisa. Zimun b'shlosha, that this, whatever this Zimun is that we don't know what it is yet, is three. And Birkas Zimun b'shlosha, and when you have a Birkas Zimun, you have for benching, you also need three. Ella, my Zimun, what does it mean when we're talking about a Zimun? What is this Zimun that we need three people for? It's Ladin. It is when you are going to summon a person for judgment, right? So one person has a court case. The guy who's probably guilty probably doesn't want to show up. So how do you get him to come? You go to Beis Din and you say, I've got a court case with so-and-so, and he won't come. So the court writes a document that says you are officially summoned to court. And if you don't show up, we're going to excommunicate you. So that gets the guy to come. So yes. So this document from the court needs three judges on it in order to be able to be an official summons. Kihad Amar Rava, like Rava said, Hani Beit Tlasa Daini Diosvi, if you've got a judgment, a court of three people, the Azil Shlicha de Beidina, and they send a messenger from the court in order to be able to invite somebody to the court case. V'amar mipuma dechad, and if the person arrives and he only gives the name of one of the judges, lo amar klum, then that shliach that has basically his statement is meaningless. His statement has to be, I come in the name of the following three judges. Adamar mishmei dekulu. He has to say in the name of all three. So hani immediately below yoma dedina. However, that is only when we're talking about a court that is convening not on one of the regular judgment days. Ezra established that courts should convene every Monday and every Thursday. Now, if they convene more often, they could convene more often. But it was already assumed that all courts were in session on Mondays and Thursdays. Therefore, if the guy comes and says, I come from Rabbi Yossi's court, and today's Monday, it's clear that he's coming from Rabbi Yossi's court, which was in session because it's definitely in session on Monday. So therefore, it is going to be a valid summons. But if he comes on a Tuesday, then Rabbi Yossi is calling me. That's wonderful, but Rabbi Yossi's not a Beis Din, right? So I need to be able to make sure that it's clear that it's an official summons of Beis Din. Tashlumi Kefel. Okay, next case in our Mishnah. Back to the issue at hand, number of judges. To make a judgment, about a thief that is going to be having to pay double because he stole, or in a case where he might have to pay 4 or 5 times the amount because he stole an animal. Shalach le Rav Nachman bar Rav Chisda. Rav Chisda sent the following le Rav Nachman to Rav Nachman bar Yaakov. Yeramdenu Rabbeinu Rabbi, please teach us. Dine knosos bekama. These rulings of knas, what makes something a knas? A knas is a fine, a penalty, which we described earlier in our Masechta. It means that the payment is not going to be equivalent to whatever the original damage was. In this case of a theft, he stole $100. Now, because he lied about it and got caught, so now he's got caught red-handed with the object, he's going to wind up paying double. So that double is not equivalent to what the damage was. The answer is, that's a knas. That's the definition of a knas.
If you're charging double, not interest?
No, interest is only if there's a loan, right? If it's a requirement to repay object what you're stolen, that's the knas. That's the punishment the Torah says. So Mike, what was he asking? What do you mean? How many judges? We learned in our Mishnah. Our Mishnah says very clearly, B'shlosh, you need 3 judges for the cases of knas, right? And why? Because we had Rabbi Parshos. We had this halachos that we had learned about Elohim, 3 judges. So Ella, Yochid Mumcha K'mi. His question was, can you get away with the 1 judge? Remember we said that when it comes to some monetary cases, you can have 1 judge that's an expert. His question is, could I get away with knas cases also with 1 expert judge? So, so he says, so he says, can I get away with this 1 judge to make this judgments when it comes to knas rules or not? So he says, Tanisuha. We already learned this halacha. When it comes to paying these double or 4 or 5 times amount fines, b'shlosha, you need 3. That's what our Mishnah said. You need 3. Now, my shlosha, when he says we need 3, what does that mean? If you meant it's 3 regular judges, non-expert judges, isn't it your father's father who is the one who said Mishmei Rav in the name of Rav? Afilu asara and he said, when it comes to these court cases of knas, even if there are 10 judges there, if they are not experts, then psulun l'dinei knosos, they are invalid for making judgment rulings about knas cases. So therefore, regular judges who are not valid are unacceptable. Ella mumchin. Rather, you always need for knas, you're going to need a mumcha, right? He has to be expert. That's why we don't have knas rulings in modern times, because we don't have this judgment that is permission granted from Rabbi to Talmud, dating all the way back to Moshe Rabbeinu. It died out. We'll see in the Gemara at what point that it started to die out, but it got cut off because the Romans prohibited the transmission of the smicha from rabbi to student. After a while, they were executing everybody who would transmit the permission to judge, and so it got cut off. So we don't have it anymore. There's no knas rulings. Also, that you're not allowed to judge knas rulings potentially as long as the Sanhedrin is not in the Beis Hamikdash. So this knas rulings are out. There's no knas rulings anymore. So those rulings of knas were only by mumchin. And we see they're only by mumchin, and our Mishnah still says the kamar shlosha needs to be with 3, which means that if it was 1 mumchin would not be sufficient. Our Mishnah says 3, it has to be mumchin, that we know. So therefore, when the Mishnah says 3, it means 3 that are mumchin. The Chachamim say motzi shem rabes and rishosha. The next one is an argument between Rabbi Meir and the Chachamim about whether the case of Motzi Shemra requires 3 judges or 23 judges. So going through what is the case of Motzi Shemra. So the pasuk tells us, maybe we should get a chumash for this. Just quickly read through the psukim. I'll tell it outside. Well, we'll read the psukim. Maybe we'll read the psukim next time. We don't have much time right now. But the concept is like this, right? A fellow gets married, right? And a father marries off his daughter. Now, that means if the father's marrying off his daughter, that means she's between the ages of 12 and a half. If she's older than that, the father does not have the right to marry off his daughter. If she's younger than that, right? Then it's the halachos of Motzi Shemra do not apply. So it's going to be during this very short window of time that these halachos apply. And the fellow gets married, and he accuses the woman of not being a virgin once they're married, and he says that she cheated on him between the time that they were engaged, between the Erusin and the Nesuin. Now, if she indeed had relations after Erusin, before Nesuin, then she is Chayav Misa. She's obligated for a death penalty. because she's not allowed. She's an Ashes ish. She's considered a married woman from the time of the Erusin. So if she had relations, like this fellow was accusing her of having relations before they got married, so then she's going to get a death penalty. Okay. Now he comes forward and he says this is his claim: she cheated, and that therefore I should be able to, when I divorce her, to not have to pay ksuba for her because she acted inappropriately, right? And therefore she's going to lose her ksuba. Now, the challenge is like this. If he comes forward and he says, I have witnesses to what I'm saying, I know it's true, I know she cheated because these two guys saw it and they told me about it this morning, and so I know she cheated. So if that's the case, then this is going to be a capital court case because the punishment for a woman who cheats is skila, right? And the man that she cheats with as well. So she's going to skila stoning. Yeah. So that's the punishment that's supposed to get. That's a different tribunal. That's where it's going to be 23 judges. So, however, if he's coming forward and he says, I don't have any witnesses, but I heard this. This is the information I've got. I'm pretty sure that it's true and I know it. Okay. And I heard it maybe, okay. So he's making this claim. The question is, why do we believe him? Right? What does he know? So the answer is he's believed because yesterday, if he had come to say that she cheated, right? And then he would have no obligation of paying ksuba at all because they wouldn't have been married within the suin. So he wouldn't have to pay the ksuba at all. And he would have gotten out of this altogether. So what did he gain? He got to have a night with her. Well, here's the problem. He had to pay for this whole wedding celebration. So he just spent thousands of dollars on a big wedding party for what? To be able to live with her, to sleep with her that night, and then come in the morning and say that that she cheated on me? That doesn't make sense. Doesn't make sense. If the guy wanted out of this marriage, all he had to do is come yesterday and say, I want out of the marriage, and we would have said, fine. And then he wouldn't have had to pay. He would have written her a get, and everybody would have walked out, and it would have cost him nothing. And now today, he's coming and he paid. We're worried that he shouldn't pay the ksuba, and he's paid for this whole wedding celebration. It makes no sense. So therefore, we're going to believe what he's saying. We're going to say there's a rational argument to make that what he's saying, he really believes in, and that what he's saying is true. Okay, so therefore, if the husband makes this accusation, we're going to presume that he is correct, and he's going to be able to divorce her without paying for a ksuba. Sorry? Okay, so now, the father's not going to take this so well. The father, on the other hand, is going to say this is a false accusation. So, if he can prove his side and prove that the accusation is false, right? Either he can bring witnesses or some other proof of some kind that the accusation is false, then the husband is considered to be a liar. And the punishment for being a liar in this circumstance is that he can never divorce his wife. At least maybe, I don't know if she gives permission, they can or not. But he has now lost all rights in that regard. And he has a 100 shekel penalty, which is a significant amount of money, to pay to the father for the embarrassment.
How much is that penalty anyways?
So 100, imagine 100 shkolim. I don't know what the real value of 100 shkolim is nowadays, but I know that when it comes to pidyon haben, 5 shekel is the amount that we kohanim take for pidyon haben, and we have certain coins with certain ounces of silver. I own those coins. The 5 shkolim cost about $150, $200. So therefore, at least you're about 20 times that. So it's a $4,000 fine at the very least. It's a significant amount. It's a decent fine for this crime. So that's the way this is working.
So it's not the rule of my code that he was basically going to get a kill.
So that's the question. What is his claim, right?
If she comes in them, right? Then he should have the same punishment.
Okay, so let's mention this. We'll mention this a little early. This will be our setup. We'll probably get into the cases on Sunday morning. But we have a concept of Edom Zomimim, of scheming witnesses. Okay? The concept goes like this. We want to be able to keep our witnesses truthful and honest. What's to stop a witness because everything in our court system is based on the idea that two witnesses come in and they say something happened, we believe them. Well, if it's that easy, all I need to do is get two people who could tell any story and I can win any court case. So what's to prevent that from happening? There's a very severe punishment for witnesses that are false. If two witnesses come in and they lie about a testimony, if the person who's being accused, right, the defendant, is able to bring his own witnesses, that the witnesses that are testifying against him couldn't possibly be testifying about that case because those witnesses were with them at that time, then the two witnesses get the punishment that they were trying to inflict upon that defendant. So if these two people walk into court and say, this defendant owes $1,000, right, to the other person, and then they're false, they're proven to be not false witnesses, but we call them Adam Zom, scheming witnesses. We'll explain the difference between false witnesses and scheming witnesses when we get to Marcos, Maseches Marcos. But these witnesses are considered to be scheming. They were not there at their testimony is not valid, and two witnesses come and contradict and say, you were with us at the time of that testimony, then these two witnesses now have an obligation to pay the $1,000 to the defendant that they were trying to get into trouble. If it's a capital case, they can be executed. Okay, so what you're saying is, now comes this husband. This husband comes along and he says, your daughter, she cheated before marriage, and so she should get the death penalty. Well, he's not two witnesses. So therefore, even if he's not telling the truth, he doesn't get the death penalty.
No, he doesn't, but
So if he brought two witnesses to support his claim, and the father is able to refute those two witnesses, then yes, those two witnesses would get the death penalty. We're going to talk about that. Is coming up in about a page or so.
Two witnesses must have 100% clarity of what
they've witnessed. Correct.
Not just
that's also that's coming up in Maseches Makos as well. Rabbi Akiva has an argument with the Chachamim. We'll wait when we get to Maseches Makos. We're going to talk about the rules of courts in this Masechta. The rules of witnesses come in Maseches Makos. So we'll talk about what the witnesses would have to really see in that case. So you'll trust that they witnessed something, and whatever it is that they witnessed was all they needed to witness. Okay. So now this is what we're dealing with. The Mishnah's argument is that the Chachamim say that you're going to need 3 judges, and Rabbi Meir is going to say that you need 23. No, I got it backwards. Rabbi Meir says 3, the Chachamim say 23 judges. So we're going to try to figure out why is it that the Chachamim are going to say 3, and Rabbi Meir is going to say 3, and the Chachamim are going to say 23. So, so let's, for example, do the first line as an example. Since we give this introduction, we may as well apply it once before we take our break. But we're going to try to give 8 different explanations for what the argument between Rabbi Meir and the Chachamim is all about. Okay, so first was now v'chi yesh bo dinei nefashos ma'havi. So he says, so okay, what difference does it make? Okay, let's say where's this argument? The husband is coming along. What's his claim? What's he saying? He's saying that I want to divorce this girl and I don't want to pay the ksuba. That's his claim. That's all he's saying. He's not trying to kill her. He didn't bring any witnesses with him. Nothing. He just came along. He said, look, I'd like a divorce. She was not a basula. She was not a virgin. Therefore, I'd like my divorce, and I don't feel I need to pay the ksuba because I feel that she acted inappropriately. That's his claim. He didn't bring any witnesses. He's not saying anything about witnesses. Okay? Because we said that we're going to presume he's telling the truth based on the fact that he paid for the wedding ceremony. Right? That was what he said. So he's coming along. This is his claim. Now, how many judges are we going to need? So Rabbi Meir says 3. That's all it is because it's a money case. The Chachamim say 23. So why? Because this might turn into a case that somebody might get killed. Well, okay, who cares? At the moment, my Havi, today, that's not the court case. So if there's another court case, witnesses come later on, fine, that'll be a different court case. So Amar Ula explains, the first way to understand this Mishnah is, are we worried about the rumor, the gossip that comes out from a court case. Once this husband shows up and he says, I am accusing her of committing adultery. I want a divorce, and I don't think I need to pay the ksuba. That's all he's saying. He doesn't want to kill her. He's not bringing any witnesses. He doesn't even know there are any witnesses. Once that happens, everybody in town starts talking. Oh my goodness.
That's equivalent to killing.
Well, because why? Because somebody in town probably witnessed the case.
But not only that, but it's just her name is.
And that we won't say it's equivalent, right? That's a good medrash, but it's not quite. But it's not. But it isn't the same, right? She's still alive. She's embarrassed, but still alive. Now, Rabbi Meir Savar Eichosh Lalaz. Rabbi Meir says, 3 judges. We're not worried that somebody else out there is going to start hearing about the court case and come in as witnesses. The husband's coming in. He doesn't have any witnesses. That's where the case is going to end. The Rabbanan disagree, and they say you got to have a case with 23. Why? Because once this court case comes out publicly, somebody's going to go, oh, I know that story. Her, yes. Me and my buddy, we witnessed the whole thing. We were at the bar. We know what happened. And they'll come and they'll give testimony, right? The police do that all the time nowadays, right? That they announce that somebody got arrested and they say, if anybody has any more cases or knows more information, come forward, right? So the Chamim are concerned that that's exactly what's going to happen. Once the court case opens, so other people are going to come. So therefore, this case that the husband is starting off with no witnesses, is going to turn into a case that there are witnesses, and that could be a reason why they hold that way. Okay, so we'll stop here. We're going to give 7 other explanations.